hi Leigh, how are you?
Hello, it's lovely to be back with Queer Girls Watch the West Wing. I'm so thrilled about this episode.
Me too. I had a lot of fun.
I had such fun with episode 6.
Yeah, I think we've really hit our first kind of like almost light-hearted episode in a way.
It just really feels like, oh, this is the gang.
I actually have that in my notes that like I feel like we fully assembled the squad at this point.
Yeah. Avengers Assemble.
Yeah.
Triggering. I don't know why I brought Marvel into it. That's
like very hetero of you, Leigh. For context, I had an ex-boyfriend who was, I don't know, would you describe it as being like heavily into Marvel?
Yeah. And definitely like caught us mid-lockdown and was like, this is when you're going to watch all of the Marvel films.
Let me explain the Marvel films to you women. It's wild that the relationship lasted as long as it did, in retrospect. Anyway, maybe we won't keep that in. He's not going to be listening. He doesn't like me. Okay, well, thank you, listeners, for joining us again. Queer Gals Watch the West Wing, our episode 6, I cannot believe. And if you're just joining us, hi, and thank you. And if you want to catch up, there's 5 other fabulous episodes for you to listen to, where Leigh and I will be chatting. I think the technical term is absolute shite.
Chatting shite in the strong Irish proud tradition.
Yes, but also with just some lovely educational moments from Lee Douglas. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Leigh and I were both very excited by the title of episode 6 of season 1 of The West Wing, because it is in fact called Mr. Willis of Ohio.
So thrilled. Couldn't be more excited. There's something so thrilling about like an episode title just being like a new character introduction.
Exactly. And I think for me, I read the title and I was like, is this going to be like a quote unquote, like the average American man? Like, who is the average American man? But then you came in with some information about Ohio.
Yes, which is that famously Ohio is a swing state. It is very politically down the middle. And it does have a bit of a reputation, with all peace and love to my Ohioans who may be listening. It does have a bit of a reputation, quite, I would say, similar to where you are from in England, the West Country, as kind of being like a country bumpkin type vibe.
Yeah, no, I do connect with that on a deep level. Like, farming is an important industry.
Yeah, and let me just, this is just such a swift aside, just for some context for the listener on who Fiona King-Will is, because you might hear her posh English accent and be like, I know who she is. You don't. We once were watching, I don't know why we were watching the news at university. I think there was some flooding happening in the West Country.
Likely, yeah. And
they were interviewing what I can only describe as the most unintelligible farmer I've ever, I couldn't, I was like, is this a like a local native language? Like, what's going on here? And Fiona was like, not only can I understand every word that man is saying, but I know him.
That's just Reg. That's just old Reg, not to be confused with young Reg. Yeah. That's some lovely context there. Thank you, Leigh.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this accent is much like when Leigh ends up sounding like me. We are both just sort of like weird homing pigeons to whatever accents that we're around, just throwing off the shackles of our native accents and just being like, I guess I sound like I'm from London now. Back to Mr. Willis from Ohio. Let's dive into the recap.
Yeah.
I loved the opening of this episode because we opened with the gang playing like a late night poker game in the White House. And CJ was, yes, in fact, the dealer. And I have concluded that was incredibly fit. Leigh, thoughts?
Yeah, I could not have been more pleased to the rejoinder to the Friends poker episode where the girls can't play poker by having our queen, CJ, be the woman in charge.
And honestly, she's like dealing the cards, but she's doing like little, like kind of like little bits each time she like puts the card down, like kind of like, ooh, a 6 for you, Mr. President Bartlett. Like little like witty moments, which is just
she knows what she's doing.
To do that off the cuff, that is marry me energy.
Oh, 100%.
Obviously, this is undercut by Bartlett being back on his usual petty shit from like moment one.
what is he talking about? He's like, what? There is one fruit that grows its seeds on the outside, and it's like, this is not relevant.
No, but and you did say that like this is very like granddad energy.
Particularly my grandfather, who is obsessed with the English language, when he was like, name all the punctuation marks in the English language. And it's like, hun, like we're trying to play poker. Is this some kind of tactic to throw people off their game?
I think that's what it is. Because on my second watching of the episode, I was like, like this is like he knows it gets under everyone's skin. So like this is his like poker face thing.
It's very the pettiness of the man who hosts University Challenge.
Oh,
who like
Jeremy Paxman? Yes,
is so.
It's very Jeremy, who will ask some like unintelligible question that is like so complicated that he would not know the answer to.
If he didn't have the autocue, he wouldn't know the answer, and yet he'll be like, "No, sorry, try better next time."
It obviously is x to the power of 34. Please. And you're like,
at least
poor 19-year-old from,
him.
Loughborough University's doing their best, Jeremy. Just give them a chance.
At least, Jed does actually know the answers to his own questions.
That is true. I just want to linger with CJ just for one more moment. And I think I came to the conclusion, Leigh, that I don't really like people explaining things to me. I'm a very stubborn person. However, I would let CJ explain poker to me.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Like I would go to her and be like, I know nothing, teach me.
She does kind of have like hot teacher vibes.
Mate, is that it? Do you think maybe that's what this is all about?
That's what it is. I think CJ is the teacher that all the queer girls had a crush on in school.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who did you have a teacher? You don't have to name them, but do you have one in mind?
I do.
Me too.
Listener, I did not come out for another 10 years. Even to myself.
I think it was longer for me as well. I'm like, why do I always want to be in her classroom at lunchtime? For the love of God, Fiona. Anyway, we finished the game. It's very enjoyable. Everyone's had a lovely evening. And then crash. Everyone's like, say hi to Jenny, Leo. And is it Bartlett says like, give Jenny a kiss from me?
Yeah.
And Leo's like, will do.
I'm so glad we're picking up this thread.
Yeah, like he still hasn't told anyone at work that they're separating,
and we've had like a whole episode in between that happening.
I know.
Where he's just been like silently devastated and heartbroken and not told anyone.
And also grappling with his sobriety. Like, I mean, I know that Leo is very much like the dad character in this. That's like the kind of stoical, like he never shows weakness. But I just really need him to like soften when it comes to this.
Need to get him a Brene Brown video and be like, the power of vulnerability, Leo.
Exactly. But the drama of this moment is that as everyone's trying to go home, the security detail come in and say that the building is not secure and they all have to like wait in the Oval Office. Some might say that would be a very stressful environment. But Bartlett just decides to continue his quiz.
I think that that's his way of like keeping the mood light and fun.
I mean, that's fair. In that way, I respect it. But also, I'm just like, is now the time to be talking about strawberries?
So true.
And Leigh put a note in our little shared doc here, just saying, not to be a misogynist, but Mandy is so annoying. Would you like to explain?
She just like ends the scene by being like, this is the kind of thing that never used to happen at my old job. And I'm just like, it's like.
I think the shameful thing is that Mandy is now a skin deep character and she has nothing to say.
Yeah, like, where is the road rage of yore? Like, how has she just become this like basic bitch?
There was so much potential.
So crazy that this it's like, no, like you work for the president, like please.
This is the thing, is that like when we first met Mandy and she was like driving her car onto pavements and shouting at people in the street, I was like, okay, here's a woman that's just like obviously completely bonkers, but just doing what she can to get shit done. And now she has turned into one of those girls that's like very pick me energy and very like, oh my
100%.
God, I'm so random. But like, I don't know, like, I'm one of those girls that just knows how to play poker and I just prefer like hanging out with the guys.
She's the Manic Pixie Dream Girl before the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And I think that's why I find it so irritating.
Yes.
Because like she's not what we were promised.
No.
We were where is the strand of her breakup with the senator?
She got over it very quickly.
She's currently going through heartbreak. Why are we not exploring that? Why are we not exploring her vulnerability in the fact that she's currently working with her ex-boyfriend? She's just become a shell of herself, and I'm so upset about it.
I know. And you can see the writers really trying to bulk out her character, and there's just nowhere to go.
But they're also ignoring the backstory that they already gave her.
Yeah, like they're trying to find immediate conflict, like conflict in the workplace, but I think they just need to go back.
Yeah.
And I think it's because Mandy is a character that, and again, if I was in the writer's room, which I wasn't, I would be like, does Mandy deserve like a cutaway scene? Like, do we see Mandy outside the White House in this episode? And I think the answer is always no, because she doesn't have a job with enough influence.
Yeah.
But I think that means that we just never have enough from her.
Yeah. And I would just like to point out our predictions for Daisy, her co-worker at the consulting group that they were running together. It does seem that our predictions for Daisy did come true in that we've never seen Daisy again.
I know, I'm gutted. My hope is that like somewhere in Washington, Daisy is still at her consulting office and they have picked up more clients because Mandy is at the White House. But yeah, I mean, I mourn the loss of Daisy.
Pour one out for Daisy.
And her chocolate slacks.
They were beautiful.
Shall we move on to Toby and his rage with the Constitution?
There is just something so fabulous about being like, I need a copy of the Constitution.
It is sensational. And obviously, you know, running back to our conversation in last week's episode, the immediate move to go to all of the executive assistants and be like, well, obviously you should have a copy of the Constitution and redemption for us, Leigh, because there is an executive assistant called Bonnie.
Yes.
So we didn't just pull the name Bonnie out of thin air. She is one of the team that works for Leo and the gang.
And her desk does appear to be close to Kathy's.
Yes.
So that may be where the confusion lies.
Indeed. What I loved was when all of the EAs were like, what do you mean? Like, I don't just keep a copy of it at my desk. Toby just shouts, try Amazon.com or break into the National Archive. The level of stress that man exists in at a day-to-day level is exhausting.
I think it's because they remind me of lesbians a little bit, which is why I enjoy them. But like, I just love a man who's just furious at all times, because men who are furious at all times, you never need to actually be like afraid of. Because if they're low level furious the whole time, you know that they're actually a teddy bear.
Yes. And like furious about inconsequential things. So that kind of leads us on to what's going to be like the main story thread of this episode, which is the census.
Yes.
And this kind of story begins with CJ cornering Sam Seaborn and doing what no man can ever do, which is admit that she doesn't know something in its entirety.
Yeah.
And she has to admit that to a male colleague.
Just let's take a moment for CJ's bravery in this moment. I would so happily go to a female colleague and be like, I'm so sorry, can you just briefly explain this thing to me? Because like this one thing I just can't get my head around. The bravery of going to a male colleague and saying that.
Especially someone as like full of himself as Sam Seaborn. You know, famously a guy with a lot of confidence. And so I rate CJ in this moment. Also, she wants to understand the census. You and me both, CJ. You and me both.
Yeah.
It's a complex thing. And it feels like every country does it differently. So I was kind of excited. I'm looking forward to the tutoring session because I think that will help me as well. The other kind of storyline that's floating around that's kind of tied in with the census thing this episode is talking about the budget surplus and therefore the appropriations bill, which I think is the plans that the government has to spend the surplus. Correct?
The appropriations bill is like how they're going to spend the budget.
Great. So one thing that they do stunningly in this episode is, again, Donna and Josh have some excellent walk and talks, sparks flying, classic flirtatious energy, but they try and like, they use it as this like Donna being the layman and Josh being the expert. So like Donna's like, but what do you mean? Like, I just want my money back. I want to buy a DVD player. And he's like, well, this is the thing. And I found that so helpful because it was still a joke. It was still like the language of their relationship being like flirty and cheeky. But also I was like, I now understand what's happening. Thank you.
Now, I do think we need to address that like most of this episode is men explaining things to women. And while that is like so helpful because these are complicated issues that we want to understand, could there not have been one scene where it was the man that didn't understand and the female colleague needed to explain?
Yes. And I think the energy that we're having from a lot of the female colleagues in this episode is a lot of kind of like eyebrow raising and eye rolling for other reasons. So we're getting a lot of like women being like, ugh, so tired of this. And a lot of men being like, well, the thing is, and note this down. So
at least it is consensual explaining in that the women have in fact asked questions rather than...
This is true. I mean, baby steps, Leigh. We're talking baby steps here.
I would just like to note before we move on that Donna in this scene does use the word nifty, which I find fun as a way of ribbing Josh for the fact that he is older than her.
Yes, which I really love, this kind of like, I'm just like one of the gals, I'm so young, and you're like this embarrassing old guy. No, so you were rightly about the Ohio in reference in the title, which is that the appropriations bill, so talking about what we're going to do with the budget, is also tied up within it like a section about the census and the fact that Bartlett's administration want to do sampling instead of a door-to-door census in order for it to be more representative. Yeah. So there is a vote in Congress, the House of Representatives, which is going to be, are we happy with the appropriations bill? Now, there are some people that aren't happy with the appropriations bill because of the changes to how the census is going to be done. So we need to get 3 more votes. Yeah. Did I get it right?
Yeah. Yeah, you got it exactly
right. It's so
right.
long to understand that. I feel so happy. Can I have a sticker, please?
Yeah, so like the census is part of the appropriations bill because obviously they have to apportion budget to how they're going to make the census happen.
Amazing. So that's kind of ticking along. We do get to like reference back to the security breach the previous night because Bartlett has a little meeting with the head of his security team, who's Ron.
Loved Ron with his little cameo. He was really fun. He had a lovely little regional accent. I was like, wow, what's your story?
Really lovely. But we do learn that it wasn't actually an attempt on the president's life previously. Neither was it just like some fraternity lads messing around. It was, in fact, a mentally unbalanced woman in her 40s trying to kill Zoe, the president's daughter.
But we learn this by Ron says it was a mentally unbalanced woman in her 40s. And then Bartlett says, well, she wouldn't have to be too mentally unbalanced to want to kill me.
Which I loved. And then Ron was like, oh, really sorry, I don't know how to say this, but like, she was trying to kill your daughter.
Yeah.
Which is so heavy because we also had, do you remember the backstory in like the pilot episode where Bartlett was like, oh my, is it his niece was sent like a Raggedy Ann doll with a knife in its neck? Like, I suppose I suppose this is the sort of thing that happens if you are the president. It's just like people threaten you all the time. But it is just kind of crazy. So Leo wanders into this environment where Ron and President Bartlett are chatting, and he's going to try and tell the president about Jenny. Unfortunately, this is not an optimum time, and therefore he just looks really sad and just kind of like walks out like looking sad, and it's killing me.
Yeah.
But we have what we call, I think what we should describe as a concerning, lingering moment with Ron.
Yes. It felt very reminiscent of our lingering moment with Morris before Morris was killed, shot out of the air. And I was concerned when Ron was walking out the door and the president went, Ron, and called him back. I was like, that's as good as a death sentence for Ron.
Terrible. And then he was like, Ron, did she have a gun? And Ron just like replies just, yes, sir.
So we have the inadequacy of the gun legislation from several episodes previously coming home to roost.
So clever tying it in. And I just think, Leigh, it's not the last we're going to hear about this legislation.
Yeah.
I think it's going to haunt Jed through all of his term. Yeah. So I like that it's a kind of our callback.
Yeah. And they have been kind of pitter-pattering it through the last few episodes. So I feel like we are coming back round to it.
I think it's time for us to meet the said Mr. Willis in the title of the episode.
What an icon, a hun, and a legend.
again, an actor coming in probably just for one episode and slaying every scene that he's in. A beautiful performance from this gentleman.
Justice for social studies teachers. They are some of the smartest people in America. They deserve so much more credit.
So in your social studies lessons in America, do you learn about like how the government works?
So social studies is like history, geography, civics, all tied up into one.
Oh, wow. So you don't have like a separate history lesson?
No. And
Okay.
it's kind of like philosophy as well. It's like all tied together. So you have like different modules within it. So like in 8th grade, you do a module in social studies that's like your state's history.
Oh, see, that's really fun. We had like, it was called Personal, Social and Health Education. And that was like a lesson you had like one of those or once or twice a week. And it would be an hour where they would, I mean, in my school, because we had a very high teen pregnancy rate in my county, we just sort of did sex ed every week with just like a really tired, like trainee teacher who was probably about 22 being like, for the love of God, please use protection. But it would have been helpful for us to have learned, you know, what an MP was or like how to use your vote.
I mean, I never did sex education because I had an academically rigorous schedule and therefore I never took health.
Which is really damning because it's just like, oh, well, the nerds won't get laid, so we don't have to worry about them.
Meanwhile, I was like, no, I'm not going to say that.
No. What was that, Leigh? What was that? The nerds were, in fact, getting laid. So, Toby and Mandy are kind of running this meeting with 3 congressmen who they're hoping to get on side with the census part of the appropriations bill. One of them being Mr. Willis. Now, Mr. Willis is only a congressman because his late wife, who was very recently passed away, was a congresswoman. And so he just becomes a congressman.
So she died in office. So when someone dies in office and doesn't fulfill their term, then someone can be nominated to temporarily complete their term for them, basically.
Okay. And that could be like a colleague or a spouse.
I imagine that Mr. Willis like put himself forward for it.
To like continue her work.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. So in this meeting, Toby has come to play. He is not holding back. He's like, I'm going to get these guys on my side.
He's got a copy of the Constitution on hand.
And he's also planned this meeting. He knows that most congressmen fly home after they've done their vote.
It's a holiday weekend. I'm trying to work out what time
holiday,
of year this is. I'm
it's
not
hard because
sure.
we don't get a lot of exterior shots, so it's difficult to work it out. But yeah, so there's this plan that like, if we make this meeting run long, they will agree with us in order to catch their flights, which are non-refundable.
Yes,
which is kind of genius in a way.
Yeah. If you think about it, and I think this does have actually a huge impact on politics in a way that it, much more so than it would in the UK, because obviously an MP is only ever going to be like, what, a 4 or 5 hour train ride away from their home constituency. Whereas in order to get home, for some Congress people, like if they have to be in Washington, D.C. to be a congressperson, their home could be in California.
Yeah.
Which is like a 5 or 6 hour
like a
plane
5-hour
ride.
flight. Yeah.
So like these kind of like scheduling things are actually huge considerations in terms of the travel for Congress people.
Yeah. So the Congress people present are Congressman Skinner, Congressman Gladman, and of course the iconic Congressman Willis. And Congressman Skinner and Gladman are just like quite curmudgeonly, and I think they're going to like grate on Toby. Willis obviously is just being a king amongst men and just listening politely.
Yeah, I think what we can infer here, because obviously we've learned that President Bartlett is a Democratic president. I think what we can infer here is that our other 2 congressmen are members of the Republican Party. Mr. Willis, I think it's unclear.
Yes.
But what the other 2 congressmen are saying is that it's a partisan issue, meaning that the Republicans don't believe that what the Democrats want to do is constitutional, which for anyone who's paid any attention to American politics for the last 5 to 10 years is so deeply triggering.
Yes. And just seems to be like, it's kind of become and I don't want to like oversimplify something, but it feels like that's generally modern Republican Party line.
Yeah.
Which is, don't trust the Democrats. They're trying to take away your rights.
Yeah.
Stolen election, etc. Anyway, let's go and learn about the census with CJ and Sam. We both really enjoyed the vibe of this scene because it's very kind of like, very helpful for our podcast. Because CJ literally says, imagine for the purposes of this conversation that I'm dumb. And I've never felt so seen in my entire life. And Sam's kind of being quite like fun and cheeky about it. And she's just like, you're cracking wise when I'm coming to you exposed and vulnerable.
I think all workplaces would be better if more people were willing to turn around and be like, imagine for the purposes of this conversation that I'm dumb. Please explain it to me whilst maintaining your respect for me as a human being.
100%. And she does kind of like cover that because she says to Sam, I'm admitting to you that there are things that I do not know. But she says it with such like gravitas and like, it's not like I'm stupid. It's like, okay, I want to be good at my job and I need to know more about this thing. So like, that's why I'm coming to you because you are an expert on this.
Yeah.
As opposed to you're cleverer than me. It's like,
yes,
you're an expert on this one thing.
Yeah.
Navigating it like a queen.
An inspiration to us all.
And we do find out more about the census here. And this was very interesting to me because it's very different to how it's run in the UK currently. So currently in Bartlett's term, the census, previous to this, has been run door to door. So literally the government pays for people to go around and knock on doors and be like, who lives here? Like, what religion are you? Like, what is your profession, etc. Very, very expensive, as Sam points out, and not necessarily representative because it's not taking into account people who are perhaps like between homes or homeless or people for whom English is not their first language and therefore might not be able to answer the questions.
Or even just people who are less trusting of people knocking on the door, who maybe live in the inner city and don't answer the door to people that they don't know.
Exactly. So in that sense, the idea of doing sampling,
I think sampling is they take portions of the population and they treat them as representative of the whole.
Okay, so slightly different to what we do here. When the census comes around, you get a letter through the door that's like, log on to this website, or you can, use this form and post it to us, and then you send it back, or you go online.
Yes, I mean, I think this is obviously coming from the perspective of 20 years ago, so I'm not sure.
That's very true.
If this is still a current issue.
Also, to reference what Toby said, he did call it Amazon.com. So I need to remember that, people don't have smartphones.
In the .com boom.
We really are.
Bridget Jones is just tippy-tapping away on her little laptop, on her little Apple desktop in that office with Hugh Grant, just like fannying around with her little press releases.
Exactly.
That's where we are.
Printed news is still king in this world. The other good news, and it's not a new character alert, but it's a return of a character that was a fave for us, is that Mallory is back, Leo's daughter, who we first met with her primary school class, elementary school class even, doing a White House tour. And Leo does give me the bit of the ick, because I think he calls her baby, and I don't like that. Parent-child. Unfortunately, it's kind of how I feel when women especially refer to their dads as daddy. Not because I'm sexualizing it, but just because if you're a grown woman, you can use your father's name. Am I wrong?
I think it's a very specific, it's very specifically in England, daddy has
it's very
a particular
class
vibe.
Vibe. And it does give me very WASP American as well.
Yeah. Whereas I have aunties who will, in their 60s, who will still refer to my grandparents as Mammy and Daddy.
But it's kind of, I'd say accent is important.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So like strong Irish accent, I'm like, well, that makes sense. It's giving respect.
Yeah.
Whereas like whiny American, and I'm just, no.
Yeah.
Anywho, Mallory knows about the split between Jenny and Leo, which I really feel I'm glad about.
And she's come to drop off clothes for him at his office to make sure that he has all his things.
Because he's living in a hotel because he's given Jenny the house.
I wanted your mom to have the house.
We don't deserve him. And then then there is just this utterly devastating moment where Leo says, this thing with your mother and me, it will blow over. And Mallory just looks him dead in the eye and says, no, Dad, it won't.
Oh, it's so devastating.
Just a daughter telling her father that his marriage is over.
Don't even make me cry.
I don't know why. I just really
I was
emotionally
going to say,
affected.
there's two things that make Fiona cry, which is old men and horses running free. but this really got me.
Yeah, basically I can't deal with like old men being sad. So this was very stressful for me. And I would just like to take a moment to explain the horses running free. I mean, it is as simple as it sounds, which is just there is something so majestic about animals like running boundless.
Dear listener, she's gone. We've lost Fiona.
In the UK, there's a particular banking advert for a bank called Lloyd's TSB, where it's always an acoustic version of a pop song being sung by like some sort of like kind of gravelly voiced ingenue, and then just like a pack of like black horses,
black stallions
running slow-mo through like the countryside of England. And
does it make you proud to be English? Is that the one thing that makes you proud to be English?
It makes me emotional about my nationality. I don't know if pride's got anything to do with it. I'm just like, these beautiful lands, we're so blessed.
I was at the Switchboard 50th anniversary gala, not to brag, over the weekend. And I saw Kate Butch from Drag Race, who we both went to university with.
Yes.
Which was so fun. Got to say congratulations to her in person for Drag Race. But also, Lloyd's TSB had sponsored the like red carpet thing with like the backdrop was their branding. But they clearly were so used to Lloyd's banking group being LBG that the branding on the backdrop was LBGTQIA.
Hey, I love that for them.
And I just don't know how their printers missed this.
Why? This is just like fertile ground for them.
Wow.
Sorry to just bring it back to farming again. Okay, right. Let me just get back to Washington, D.C. and out of the green land of home. Josh and Charlie are going to have some guy time. And this is prompted by Josh being invited into the Oval Office, and Bartlett, who is on a phone call, just like holding the receiver against his shoulder and just saying to Josh, take Charlie out because that kid has no life.
Savage. I just love that Bartlett has just spent his free time thinking, Charlie needs someone to take him out for a beer.
Yeah. And he's decided that that person is Josh.
Despite the fact that as President of the United States, he will be well aware that Charlie, who works for him, is deeply underage.
Yeah, right?
Charlie's meant to be like 19.
I'm going to circle back to this later because I did have questions regarding the legal drinking age, etc. So Josh goes to Charlie's desk and says, like, let's go out, and uses a phrase that I love, which is, we'll speak as men do. Okay.
I want to introduce this to our girls' cheese and wine nights. I want it to be like, come over, Fee, we're going to speak as men do.
Yes. Okay, I'm on board for that. I think the kind of hilarious consequence of this comment is that I thought that Charlie believed that he was being invited out to a strip club, but I actually think you're right with your intuition.
Yeah, because Charlie suddenly goes, wait, Josh, what kind of club is this?
Thinking perhaps Josh is like, hey, Charlie, you're cute. Let's go for a drink.
Yeah, he fully thinks Josh is asking him out.
and is really not buzzed by that idea, which is humbling for Josh in an important way, I think.
It's really important that Josh be humbled in that way, yeah.
As Josh leaves Charlie's office, he walks past Mrs Landingham, who knows about the plan for... everyone knows that Josh is taking Charlie out for a drink. And Mrs Landingham, like, ribs Josh about, like, the co-eds he's going to chat up. And Josh is like,
it really reminds me of, like, an Irish family when someone is being taken out for their, like, inaugural I'm 18 now pint. Like, when I took my cousin Laura is 5 years younger than me. When I took her out for the first time in Dublin, it was such a point of family discussion. It was like my granny being like, and I hear Leigh is taking Laura into town for her birthday. It's like, it's very that vibe. It's like it's Charlie's first like inauguration into
like
manhood.
He's never had a beer before. And also that like Josh is this like weird kind of like Casanova of downtown DC, which makes me feel physically sick. Also, I hate the fact that they're like, he's going to go and chat up some co-eds and he's like, please, there's grad students down there. And I'm like, why are we glorifying that this man who is clearly in his 30s is like on the regular, like chatting up and sleeping with women who are at university?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in his defense, he's saying, I clearly wouldn't go for an undergraduate. I would go for a grad student, which like,
it's still beige. It's still a beige flag.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Mallory and Zoe, who I love, they're kind of like in cahoots with each other, and I kind of like that as like Leo's daughter and Jed's daughter.
I love that like dynamic of like the big sister, little sister energy. I like to imagine that maybe Mallory babysat for Zoe when
Took
she
the
was
words
younger.
out of my mouth, Leigh.
Yeah.
Yes, and they're like, oh, we've heard that you're taking Charlie out for a drink, and like we're going to come too. Dad said take us too. Mallory very confidently just says, bring Sam Seaborn.
Obsessed. Harkening back to the flirtatious moment that we identified in the pilot.
Yeah. Where Sam was like, I'm so sorry, I'm having a terrible day. I accidentally slept with a prostitute.
And I just love that Mallory clearly is like, he is a hot mess and I am obsessed.
Yeah, like this is a terrible choice for me, but also I'm going to do it.
We love a messy primary school teacher.
Mm-hmm. They've got to get their kicks. They teach young children. A fate I wish on no one. So we invite Sam. Meanwhile, CJ's like, I like beer. Can you invite me, please?
It's the way that she's just like invisible to Josh, as Josh is like, we're going out as guys. Also, some girls are coming. And CJ is just like not seen by him.
Yeah, I hate that. And then he does invite her and she goes, why, Josh, you swept me off my feet.
He doesn't actually invite her. What he says is, sure, come, whatever.
Rude. Anyway, I feel like because she isn't like, oh my God, thank you. She actually just like tears him a new one. It just confirms for me that she is just keeping those boys on the straight and narrow.
Oh, absolutely.
A positive female friend for them to have, and they need to give her more respect. Anyway, before I continue getting on my soapbox about that, I will just go back to the congressman. Mm-hmm. So, door-to-door census, not a representative, but what we're assuming are the Republican congressmen are saying that you can't do sampling because it's unconstitutional. Does Toby even know anything about the Constitution? And Toby's like, well, I feel like I know more than you do. And so begins to read out a section of the Constitution, which is kind of regarding the census. He
directs Mandy to read out a section of the Constitution. He's like, Mandy, please, go ahead.
Mandy's strongest moment in the
theatrical. I love it.
Very theatrical. And in doing so, once again, proves the Constitution to be not only an incredibly outdated document, but in your words and the words of many Americans, fundamentally racist.
Yeah, because the Republicans are trying to make the argument that the article referring to the counting of people is not arcane, and therefore we need to count each individual one by one rather than sampling. But obviously, we have in that particular article the 3/5 rule, where Black people are counted as 3/5 of a person.
Which is something that Toby just turns to Congressman Willis and is like, well, Mr. Willis would know this well, being a sixth grade
social studies
teacher. And Mr. Willis is like, I see you, Toby. I see you. And so then there's some more back and forth. And Mr. Willis is like, I've decided that I'm going to vote with the bill.
Yeah, I'm going to vote yay.
I'm going to vote yay. And the other congressmen very quickly start shitting their pants because I think they thought that Mr. Willis was going to be like a soft touch and an easy pushover because he's not a congressman. He's in the position on behalf of his late wife. And they're like, oh no, Mr. Willis, are you sure? Which I find incredibly rude. And then as they leave, one of them says, do you need any help finding your way out? Like,
it's so patronizing.
It's so patronizing. He's not a child. He's a grown man. He can find his way out of a building.
Yeah.
So Toby and Joe Willis have this then like very honest conversation with each other, which is very beautiful. And again, cue me shedding some tears because Mr. Willis is like, Toby, I'm not nearly so smart as my wife was. I wasn't in her league.
Why is it so emotional, a man admitting that his wife was smarter than him?
I don't know. Just like, I think a recent widower is just something that will always completely floor me emotionally.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think we can collectively agree that Mr. Willis of Ohio is the winner of this episode.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. We should probably return to Bartlett being a grumpy, petty little bitch.
Yes. And
I can't. This whole scene made me absolutely furious.
He's being a petty little bitch because he's upset. He's upset currently about the voting, but also obviously deeply stressed that an attempt was made on his daughter's life. And he's being grumpy. And then Mrs. Landingham is trying to help. And then he like snaps at her and she says there is no need to adopt a tone, which I'm obsessed with because famously our lovely friend Amy, who is a very Geordie woman, will say, is that a tone?
When someone is being like rude or short with her, that is her go-to phrase. Is that a tone? And it strikes fear into the hearts of people, as it so should.
As it so should.
And so we kind of loved that there was a crossover moment between Mrs. Landingham and our friend Amy, because they both have the patience of a saint, but both of them will not deal with shitty behaviour.
There is a firm red line.
Yeah. So it's kind of not great that Leo enters this energy and tries to tell Bartlett about
his marriage being over.
Yeah. I can't express enough how Bartlett takes this so badly and is incredibly rude. So Leo tells Bartlett that he and Jenny have split. Bartlett says, what happened? A fair question. But then you can tell that he's like, no, don't tell me nothing happened. Basically accusing Leo of having an affair.
Yes. And then he has the audacity to say, marriage needs attention, from Mr. Bartlett, whose wife has been persona non grata for the entire series thus far. For 6 full episodes, we've not met
He didn't even know why his own wife was in Pakistan. So don't come to me and say marriage needs attention, Jed.
Please.
Wind your neck in. And then he just like signs off by like storming out of the room and being like, fix this, Leo. Leo says, it's not as simple as that, which is correct. And Bartlett's like, it is as simple as that. You're the man. Fix it. What? Anyway, from one of your oldest friends.
Crazy.
You're coming to them in a moment of vulnerability and their response is just to be like, can you just like fucking get a grip and like get your wife back?
Yeah, if you came to me and you told me, Leigh, the wedding's off. I don't know what's happened. Nothing happened. It just all fell apart. And my response was, you're the woman. Fix it. Can you imagine?
I think I'd probably break some things and take to the streets in like a fit of rage.
Leo is his best friend.
He's also running the White House for him. He's his chief of staff, for the love of God. Anyway, I think after that we all need a drink, right?
We do.
So let us to the bar.
We need to cut loose with CJ.
Let's cut loose with the gang. We're all sitting around a table in a bar, enjoying some drinks. We glean that Sam is still seeing Laurie.
Yes, so because they refer to her as his special friend.
His special friend.
Which, incidentally, is how my family often referred to you when they were convinced we were secretly a couple.
All of the times I came in for tea and everyone would be like, so how are you? It's lovely to see you and Leigh spending time together. I think it was all just because I wore trousers.
It was because you wore trousers and Timberlands and flannel shirts and we lived together.
Yes.
And I didn't have a boyfriend, famously.
Yeah. So I think let's raise a glass to all the special friends out there.
Let's pour one out.
Pour one out for the special friends. One thing that I did want to raise is that Zoe and Charlie are both under 21.
Yeah.
So how did they get into the bar? Because surely you have to show ID on the door.
I would imagine either they have fake IDs or maybe this is they're not sat at the bar. There are some places where you can be like sat at a table. You just can't be sat at the bar.
Ah, okay.
I'm wondering if that's
So
it.
I was confused because I was like, how old is Zoe? Is she, because it was like, she's studying Georgetown, but then like, is she undergrad? Is she postgrad?
We confirm later that she's 19. So her and Charlie are exactly the same age, which again pushes me towards the conclusion that sparks are going to fly.
Almost perfect for them to become a couple. We find out also that CJ has ordered what I can only describe as the most vile drink. So she's ordered
Which
something,
also like reads for her. I can just see her having like
a stupid girly little drink.
yeah. But like kind of hating herself for it.
Yeah, being like, well, I hate that I only like really sweet drinks.
Yeah.
So she's ordered a grasshopper, which Leigh is green creme de menthe, white creme de cacao, and just cream.
Ew.
That is disgusting.
Ew.
Last summer, I fell foul to creme de menthe in quite a big way because I was in a bar in France, and the like little old man behind the bar kept giving us shots, and it was in fact just like only creme de menthe that he would give to me. And I had drunk quite a lot of day wine, and I had to take myself home. Well, I had to be walked home. I did an early exit where I just sort of like touched the arm of someone I was there with and was just like, I'm going to need to go back to the Airbnb because I'm going to be violently ill.
There's nothing that I enjoy more than a Fiona Kingwell who's like accidentally gotten a little bit too pissed and is just absolutely furious with herself about it.
Yeah, I was just like, well, I don't deserve to have fun anymore. I suppose I should just go and lie alone in a dark room and think about my choices.
You love it. You absolutely love it.
CJ's ordered this grasshopper drink, which is disgusting. But the bartender hasn't brought it over. So Zoe's like, oh, I'll go and get it for you. And everyone just sort of lets her, which is wild. And
Kinda
also she's like, I'm going to leave my cell phone and my panic button at the table. Foreshadowing. Then Charlie is like, oh, do you think everyone in here is judging me because I'm not a college student?
Oh,
I know, protect him
Charlie.
at all costs. So we kind of have this moment of vulnerability for Charlie. Q, obviously, horrible men at the bar being horrible to Zoe because life is just full of men approaching women at the bar and just being like, I guess I'm allowed to just take your time and energy now.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough out there, girls. Love yous.
It's so rough out there.
I was recently introduced on stage at a stand-up gig with, she's a lesbian and isn't it a shame? Don't we all agree, fellas?
What a shame. What a shame we can't have her. Yeah, God. I would say my experience in America is that actually going out to bars is not fun because men just come up and like sit at your table.
At least like, Irish men are so filled with sexual shame that they don't speak to women that they don't know unless they're like violently drunk.
I'd say kind of the same for British lads as well. Like there's like not a lot of chat unless they're like borderline paralytically drunk. But in America, just like I barely have taken a sip of my drink and there'll be a guy being like, hey, so how you folks doing? Like sitting down and I'm like, I didn't ask you to sit with me. Like I'm here with someone.
Yeah.
I do not wish to talk to you, sir. Anyway, so there's a bit of that energy, but then it quickly escalates to them just like kind of being quite misogynistic towards her. Charlie obviously cues this from across the room, comes to the rescue, and just very, very politely tries to de-escalate. Safe to say those men take it terribly. Q just very openly racist comments towards Charlie.
That was rough.
Like bad. Just gunning for him, really. And then when he was like, again, trying to de-escalate, not rising to their slurs, they're then like, oh, you must be gay. Cue homophobia. Again, on a grand scale. Some like big homophobic slurs.
Huge.
Sam and Josh then also come over to help. And the guy who's being awful just assumes that he should use homophobic slurs towards them as well.
Yeah, and what I do love from both Charlie and Josh throughout this scene is just the energy of, you guys don't know it yet, but you're about to have a really bad night.
Yeah.
Because you've chosen to do this to the president's daughter.
Like, this is going to end so badly for you. Which it does, because as it's kind of about to like simmer to a boil, the feds enter.
Josh has simply called the feds.
Which is iconic. And Charlie gets the last word as these guys are being dragged out, which I felt like he deserved.
Yes.
But the whole thing escalated very quickly.
Very quickly.
The question on all of our lips, Leigh, is how is President Bartlett going to take this? The answer, not well.
Yeah, I also do kind of feel like men can be vaguely threatening and make women uncomfortable without also being necessarily like racists and homophobes. Like, I feel like it was almost overkill to let us know that in addition to being kind of Larry, horrible men, like it just felt like kind of overkill to be like, and they're also racist. Oh, and they're also homophobic. It can be much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I would love Aaron Sorkin to explore the concept of everyday sexism.
Yes.
Which I imagine is alive and well and rife in the White House.
Yeah.
So we're back at the White House. We're with Bartlett. He is kind of accosting Zoe about what happened. What I don't enjoy is that immediately he asks her if she started it and if she was asking for those guys' attention.
Were you flirting with them?
Yeah.
Ew. Never to speak to your daughter like that.
No.
Ew.
And through the whole of this conversation, Zoe is the one that's talking like a parent, where she's like, no, Dad, like, we talked about this. Please, could you just let me finish? And Bartlett's the one that's just like having an absolute meltdown.
Elizabeth Moss is just all of us gently parenting our boomer parents.
Oh, yeah.
Scene.
And what I will say is that she responds very well to her father going on, I would say maybe a 2-minute rant about a hypothetical scenario in which she is kidnapped.
Which, like, I totally get that anxiety. Maybe take it to a therapist rather than your daughter.
I was about to say, I was like, should we be voicing this to your child? Like, will she be able to sleep at night? She's about to go away to university and be away from you. But Elizabeth Moss gives a phenomenal performance, like single tearing. There's a hug moment and like I just want to protect you. But Leigh, I asked the question again. Where is Flotus?
Why was she not involved in this moment? Why was she not equally concerned that her daughter's panic button was pressed?
She's just off in Pakistan.
On her Ouija board. Like, God knows.
What? Like, please can we give some strength and flesh out this character, because Flotus, stop holding her from us. I need her to become like a part of this show in a big way. We do, however, get a moment of Jed softening in this episode, and Bartlett does go into Leo's office and in fact says, before, when I was being an idiot, there was something I forgot to say. I'm sorry.
Beautiful.
So Leigh, pigs can fly.
Pigs can fly.
And President Bartlett can apologize.
Amazing.
It's a very lovely moment between the two of them as friends. However, I was very distracted by the fact that Leo was wearing cute little braces.
Loved him in his kind of like undone look.
Yeah, like we very rarely see him without his suit jacket on. And I love to see that he does in fact wear braces. So that very much sort of took my attention, where I should have been really listening to the dialogue. Time for Sam, Charlie and Josh to get told off by Bartlett. I do love from Charlie that they're just sort of like sat almost like outside the principal's office with Sam and Josh being like, I could have taken that guy. What, the guy on the left? I could have taken him.
An absolutely stunning moment from Charlie where he interrupts and says, there are no two guys that either one of you could have taken.
Which I think is important for them to hear.
Specifically from a man younger than themselves.
So Bartlett calls Josh into his office first, because I think it's like, obviously like he put the responsibility on Josh's shoulders. And when Josh was like, oh, I thought you knew we were taking Zoe out. This is just psycho behavior from Bartlett when he's like, I assumed you'd be going out for malteds. Like, in what world do you think that like one of your co-workers is going to take your 19-year-old daughter out for milkshakes?
Never. I mean, it's not the 1950s. Just really showing his boomer there.
Yeah. So I do like that Josh replied with, what is this, our town? Basically saying like, this is not like the 1930s.
We then get my favorite moment of the entire series thus far, which is a glimpse into Jed Bartlett's Amdram career.
It's a gift. It's a real gift for us.
Says, you know, I once played the stage manager in a production of Our Town.
When he said that, I physically screamed. Now, context to listeners who perhaps aren't familiar with the classic American play that is Our Town, the lead character in that show is the stage manager. who's kind of like plays like a narrator role. Very Jed Bartlett casting. I hope to hear more about this production as
He
the
is
show
just
continues.
like, in this moment, he is just like every dentist, taxi driver, and accountant that you ever meet who will be like, here, you're an actor, and then be like, I was in my high school's production of Grease once. And you're like, great, good for you. I'm so glad that you played Kaniki.
Yeah, it's just important context that I feel makes the character of Jed Bartlett just even more complex episode by episode.
Yeah.
We get a full kind of like bodyguard moment though between Charlie and Zoe, because Josh says Charlie didn't blink before he put his body between Danger and Zoe.
It is very bodyguard.
It's very Kevin Costner.
But also it has some worrying kind of The Blind Side type connotations.
There is some worthiness in there that's like, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt for now, but let's keep tabs on how the show references like Charlie taking care of the vulnerable white woman. Yeah. But because of this, because Charlie didn't blink twice, Charlie is inducted into the poker group.
Which I love for him.
Yeah.
It feels like this has very much been a coming of age ep for Charlie.
Yeah, it's been kind of fun. It's been a chance for him to show his worth. And we close out the episode with the gang, the full team, the squad assembled, playing poker once again. But we always have kind of like a linger moment at the end of each episode. And often it is Bartlett just like doing some sort of sermon. And this week it was Toby like turning to the television and turning it up to see Mr. Willis give his vote.
Which we love.
I really, really loved that. And I felt that Toby deserved the linger moment.
Agreed, because they had a real moment of connection.
And Leigh, that concludes episode 6, Mr. Willis of Ohio. Let's crack on with the quick fires, because there were some big hitters this week. Yeah. So best fashion.
I'm going to have to give it to Mallory's kind of Aran jumper that she shows up in.
Yeah, it's a
beautiful knit.
It's a chunky knit. It's very like Scandi drama.
Yeah, my cousin Owen absolutely loves a chunky knit, and his chunky knits were lost recently to moths that got into his flat. And I've never seen a man so broken than Owen with the loss of his chunky knits.
Oh, poor Owen. I think for me, it's a toss-up between Leo's braces.
Just giving us real Jack Dawson vibes.
Yes. And then I think maybe it's just an honourable mention to Zoe when they're in the bar just wearing a baseball cap.
Yeah.
In a way to disguise her.
I know that this is not where they're going, but she is kind of costumed gay.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult because I feel like in 2001, fashion did have quite a low-key lesbian vibe.
Yeah,
but that she is like, they're putting her in a lot of like work shirts.
Yeah.
And like baseball caps.
I'd love President Bartlett to have a lesbian daughter. I think it would be really iconic.
Me too. But imagine if Charlie were a woman. I would love... Sorry. Moving on. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
I'm going to go ahead and say taking underage people to a bar.
Yeah, no, that would play very badly in the news.
Yeah, like taking the Prime Minister's daughter out to a bar when she's underage.
Yeah, no,
that would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I once again have just gone very like twee with this and been like, no British or Irish politician could ever get away with like playing the stage manager in a production of Our Town.
Correct, yeah.
Because I very recently found out from his recent biography that the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, is a very passionate Northern soul dancer.
No.
No. And part of me was like absolutely filled with respect for him for this. But in no way ever do I want to see him dance.
Yeah.
In terms of our like bingo card of big issues, I think we kind of came back once again to the Constitution.
Yeah.
And shock horribly, it feels like it's consistently going to come up that the Constitution is perhaps outdated. I feel like a man moment.
I'm just going to have to go with you're the man, fix it.
Ooh, yeah.
I just feel like I've never said to any of my female friends, you're the woman, you know?
No. Yeah, it's very boomer, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for me, it will go to We'll Speak as Men Do from Josh. I really liked that. And then Leigh, what was the moment that made you proudest to be American?
I'm going to take it back to the scene with Mr. Joe Willis when Toby says something to the effect of, but of course, Mr. Willis knows that something was left out of what Mandy just read. And you know that because you're a social studies teacher.
Yes.
It's a really strong moment for like justice for public school teachers for me.
And for Toby to be like, this isn't my battle.
Yes.
I'm not educating the youth of America. This man is.
Correct.
Yeah, I love that. I think my moment was Charlie didn't blink before he put his body between Danger and Zoe.
Yeah. Iconic.
Yeah. What an episode.
So much fun in the sun.
So Leigh, what are you going to teach us about this week?
We're going to unpack like what even is the House of Representatives.
Yay.
So much like the UK, the US has a bicameral elected body, meaning that there are two sections of Congress. So we have the Senate, as we've discussed before, and we have the House of Representatives. They have equal responsibility for lawmaking with the US Senate. So in order for legislation to go through, it has to be passed by both the House and the Senate. But it was the House of Representatives was conceived by the framers of the Constitution to represent the popular will of the people. The Senate was not initially an elected body. It did over time become an elected body as well. But from the beginning, the House of Representatives was an elected body. And because there are represented district rather than a whole state, they represent kind of more of a local connection than senators who represent a whole state. Each state is guaranteed at least one member of the House of Representatives, but they have more or less depending on the size of the population of that state.
Hence the census side of this.
Hence the census being concerned with this. So the issue being that the framers were concerned that they didn't want small states to have an outweighted influence over the larger states on the basis of the fact that in the Senate, each state has 2 senators regardless of the size of the population. But they also didn't want states like, say, California and Texas to be able to, with 3 states, outvote all of the other small states. So the compromise was to have 2 different systems of electing leaders, basically.
Okay.
So in the House of Representatives, Congress people are elected for 2-year terms. In the Senate, they're elected for 6-year terms.
Ooh.
And to be a congressperson, you have to be at least 25, a US citizen for at least 7 years, which is different to the president because the president has to be born a US citizen. And you have to have residency of the state from which you are elected legally.
That makes sense. That feels fair.
So the state with the most number of representatives is California. They have 52 representatives. And the states that only have 1 representative are Alaska, Delaware, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. There are also non-voting delegates to the House of Representatives from the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. territories of American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
So they are elected from the territories to come and represent their territory and the issues affecting their constituency, but they do not currently have voting rights.
That doesn't necessarily seem fair.
There's been a big issue over the years about Washington, D.C. statehood and Puerto Rican statehood, and none of these territories have representation in the Senate of any kind.
Yeah, that feels like a pretty contentious subject.
There's a big debate about how democratic that really is.
Because unfortunately, that kind of also links in with the sort of, I guess, like slightly imperial history of America.
I mean, the United States loves to say that it's never been a kind of colonial force, but I think if you look at issues like this, it has territories which are not part of the United States.
So are we saying that, like, obviously it's different because obviously in the UK we have the House of Lords and the House of Commons, but I'm going to just put the House of Lords to one side because I don't want to deal with that. So in the UK, like in your constituency, you would have your MP, but then you would also have your councillors. So he's saying that like, and this is very, very like layman's terms, ABCs, not in any way correct, but like senator is more like your MP, and then your councillor is more like your congressperson, because your councillors are doing more like door to door, like, okay, like let's help with these issues, whereas your MP is more like, you don't see them that often, and then they're not really that involved. So shade thrown at MPs there.
I don't know that there's a clear comparison to make there, but I think there is definitely a truth in what you're saying, in that your representative in Congress is going to be much more aware of the local issues affecting your specific area, rather than a senator who needs to be concerned with the issues of the whole state. So like for a state like Washington, where I lived, Seattle and Eastern Washington have completely different concerns. Because Eastern Washington is largely agricultural, it's much more politically conservative, whereas obviously Seattle is like this big city.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, I was just trying to find like anchor to compare, but I think you're right. Like in some ways that's helpful, but in some ways it's not.
So like I think one of the reasons why like AOC has been so successful, for example, is because as a representative, she was so much more in touch with the issues affecting the real people in her district than her predecessor, the incumbent Democratic representative for that area, because he hadn't really lived in that area for decades, because he'd been in Washington, D.C. and his kids weren't enrolled in schools in that area. They were enrolled in schools in D.C. And so AOC, as someone who was coming up as someone who worked in hospitality in that area, I think the massive appeal of her was she was fulfilling what the purpose of a representative is supposed to be so much more.
Yes, which is why we have so much respect for her.
We love. Now, we also have the Speaker of the House, who is elected by the House of Representatives. They are the elected leader of the House of Representatives, and they have a couple of different roles, which is that they are the presiding officer over everything that happens on the floor of the House. They are the leader of the majority party in the House, and they are, if the president is of the other party, they will be the highest up person in that party, if that makes sense. So currently, the president is the highest elected member of the Democratic Party. The highest elected member of the Republican Party currently is the leader of the House, is the Speaker of the House, sorry.
And that is currently...
We're going to get there. The Speaker of the House, also, this is important to keep in mind for where I'm going, the Speaker of the House is also second in line to succeed the president.
Oh, so if the vice president for some reason dies or can't do it... So say
there's some kind of attack or something and both the president and the vice president are killed, the Speaker of the House becomes president.
Huh. Okay.
Which is deeply concerning, which was what we'll get to. Yes, so Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House from 2007 to 2011, and then again from 2019 to 2023. She was the first woman to ever lead a major political party from 2003 to 2023. And she's been a member of the House since 1987. And she is still a member of the House now. She just stepped down as leader.
I'm guessing because she is a Democrat.
She is a Democrat, but also she stepped down because she wanted to make way for a new generation. She is in her 80s now. And also 3 weeks prior to her. So she stepped down just after the Republicans had won back the majority in the House in 2022. So she could have remained on as leader of the Democratic Party in Congress, but she chose not to. And so another Democrat was elected to leader, which is kind of like the shadow. You know how in the UK there's the shadow of each thing.
The shadow cabinet is the one that is the so like at the moment, like everyone in the Labour Party is the shadow
So there is still a Democratic leader in the House, despite the fact that they don't currently have the majority, which is the same as the fact that every Labour position in the cabinet is filled by a shadow secretary.
Yeah, I find it kind of crazy and very fills me with respect that a woman in her 80s continued to do her job post January insurrection. where people were physically like running through the building trying to find her to harm her.
Trying to specifically find her and harm her. But she did step down after her husband was attacked in their home in California about 3 weeks before she stepped down, and he was hospitalized by a home intruder.
I remember this.
Yeah, and it was made really light of by many members of the Republican Party. And I think many members of the Republican Party have also tried to kind of paint Paul Pelosi as some kind of cuckold because his wife is such a powerful woman, which is just misogynistic, but that's fine. When she stepped down, she said, "With great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to the Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour has come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. I am grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility." And when she first entered Congress in 1987, there were 12 women in the Democratic caucus, and there are now 90.
Thank you, Nancy.
We love Nancy. Nancy was an excellent Speaker of the House because the Speaker of the House is the one who calls for bills to be voted on. And Nancy Pelosi never brought a bill to the floor that she didn't know in advance she had the votes for. So the last Congress that she presided over was the most productive Congress in history. Like, they passed the most legislation. In contrast, the current Congress is the least productive Congress of all time, run by the Republicans. And that is largely due to the fact that they refuse currently to pass anything that would help President Biden look good.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about, and again, coming from basically little to no knowledge, it feels like when Obama was president for his 2 terms, and then now with Biden, the kind of general rule of thumb from the Republicans is just, let's block anything, regardless of if it benefits anyone.
Correct, yes. So Kevin McCarthy succeeded Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House.
An unfortunate surname.
Yes, Kevin McCarthy. It took 13 votes for him to get the speakership. And he ended up, in order to try and wheedle his way into the job, he put in a clause that meant that it would only take one member of Congress to call for his removal for it to be put to a vote, which was, of course, the beginning of his own demise. Because when he...
That's so dumb. That's so dumb.
Yeah, so basically Kevin McCarthy had the equivalent of like a vote of no confidence, which obviously we're all deeply familiar with now living in the UK. That's essentially what happened to Kevin McCarthy. He tried to avoid a government shutdown by negotiating with President Biden on a budget, to pass the budget for the year. And the Republicans were not happy with this because they wanted a government shutdown so that Biden would be blamed for it. And Matt Gaetz, who is an awful human being, he had an investigation going into him about human trafficking, which was dropped without any charges being pressed. But
I'm sorry, and he's a congressman.
He's a congressman from Florida.
A Republican congressman.
He wasn't ultimately charged, but there was a 2-year investigation.
Just one very quick sidebar. In the UK, we have quite not in recent years, but there was quite a good period of time where MPs, just generally, there was quite a lot of resigning. Like, if you got caught up in something bad, more often than not, just to save face, you might just resign. I'm assuming that this doesn't tend to happen that much in the House of Representatives.
Not anymore. There has been some recent, actually on the Democratic side, there has been some resignations when stories have come out, but it hasn't happened as much recently. So Matt Gaetz called for Kevin McCarthy's removal by saying, "It's going to be difficult for me and my Republican friends to keep calling President Biden feeble when he continues to take Speaker McCarthy's lunch money in every negotiation. What commitments were made to President Biden to continue the spending of President Biden in exchange for doing things for President Biden? It's increasingly clear who the Speaker of the House already works for, and it's not the Republican conference," which he accused Kevin McCarthy of simply because Kevin McCarthy was making a bipartisan deal with the president.
It's all very like schoolyard, isn't it?
It's extremely schoolyard. They then tried to elect a new Republican speaker for 3 weeks, So the House was speakerless for 3 weeks, meaning absolutely nothing could get done, with a government shutdown looming because obviously the budget had not been passed. That was the longest gap of being speakerless since 1962. Speakers are typically elected at the beginning of a new congressional session, which happens every 2 years. It's extremely rare to have one in the middle of a season, and generally it only ever happens in the event of a death or a resignation. This was the first time an elected speaker had ever been dismissed. Which brings us to the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who was elected, I think, largely because no one really knew who he was.
That's bleak.
And therefore he didn't carry any of the kind of baggage associated with any of the other candidates. They went through about 5 candidates, all of whom failed to get the number of votes that they needed. And so Mike Johnson is a Louisiana representative who won unanimous support from Republican colleagues who called him MAGA Mike.
Oh no, I don't like that.
Yeah, some choice quotes from Mike Johnson. You know, we don't live in a democracy because a democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb deciding what's for dinner. Okay, it's not just majority rules, it's a constitutional republic. The founders set that up because they followed the biblical admonition on what a civil society is supposed to look like. Yeah, it's bleak. He then also is quoted as saying, Roe v. Wade, which is obviously the ruling that protected the right to an abortion in the United States. Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this.
I can't express to you how angry that statement makes me.
Essentially making the issue of a woman's right to choose an economic issue, apparently, when it is a deeply economic issue for women who are making the choice not to carry a pregnancy to term. Oh. It is so insulting.
It's vile. It's truly vile, actually. And it is scary that someone who has such backward views has such a politically strong and visible role.
He's the second in line to the president.
Oh my God.
He has been called a key architect of Trump's attempted coup. He tried to criminalize gay marriage and gay sex and wants to institute a national abortion ban. He's currently trying to institute something similar to Section 28.
Shit.
Yeah. Which, for listeners outside of the UK, Section 28 was what made it illegal to discuss being gay in British schools, which was thankfully overturned within mine and Fiona's lifetime. But he is trying to institute something similar in terms of Florida's Don't Say Gay law, but he is trying to institute it in all public institutions. So in schools, libraries, and hospitals.
That's crazy.
He's also referred to being gay as inherently unnatural and a dangerous lifestyle that could lead to legalized pedophilia.
I cannot understand, and I'm not saying that it isn't present in the UK because it is, but it's something that feels like is very prevalent in America, which is this bizarre thing that is pedophilia being the same as homosexuality.
It's absolutely baffling.
And I just can't control my rage. And also I just feel like when someone like him is discussing all of this, we need to quote unquote protect children and we need to, to use a troubling phrase, make America great again. I don't think that censorship is the way to making people feel safe.
Right. And, often the Republican Party puts itself forward as the party of freedom, and they want to have individual liberty. But what he's actually...
And what says freedom more than controlling everyone all of the time and allowing them not to make their own choices?
What he's actually talking about is freedom for heterosexual white men and freedom for no one else.
Yes, because Leigh, we do need to remember that heterosexual white men, they've had a rough time of it.
And they are the default human being.
Yeah.
We forget this sometimes, that everything should be built around them.
They are the best, and therefore, do you know what? We should probably just be quiet and just make them dinner.
We should. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, I want to smash something.
He's referred to mass shootings as a punishment for abortion.
What a hateful man.
A hateful man.
And so if you're, say you're a Democratic congressperson currently, how do you get rid of this human? Can you like appeal?
Well, there's going to be another election. When the presidential election happens, there's also going to be another election in the House. So the hope obviously would be that Democrats take back the House in 2024, because Joaquin Jeffries, who is the leader of the Democratic Party currently in Congress and who would then take over as Speaker, is what can only be described as an absolute gem.
Thank God.
Just a fun note to end on, just to
please.
to pull us out of this dark spiral. But I did feel like it was important to actually like take note of who this man is and what he has actually said on the public record on purpose.
No, it is really important, and I think that, you know, I am, and you are. We're lucky enough to live in like very like cosmopolitan cities, and we can legally have same-sex marriages here and love the people that we want to love, and that is also the same for a lot of the states. And when you have a great support network around you, sometimes when we're privileged, we can forget that actually there are very hateful people that want to break us and don't think that the way that we love people should be legal. And it's crazy that in 2024, someone who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives is saying such damaging and dangerous things that are going to be heard and taken in by young people.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have to say, I obviously grew up in Ireland as a young child. I then emigrated to the United States, and you know, Ireland, when I grew up in the late 90s and early 90s, was still a very conservative country. Obviously, abortion was illegal in Ireland until 2018. And then I went to Seattle as a young person, and it was like, wow, this is such a more liberal place. And I really feel like I've watched my two countries almost swap places over the course of my lifetime. Like, Ireland is unrecognizable now in the best way. And it's really sad to see that American women might now be facing what Irish women have faced for 100 years and have just become free of.
Yeah. I suppose it brings into relief just like the sheer size of the United States and the amount of people living there, and therefore I suppose how broad that spectrum of experience and like the spectrum of politics that we're dealing with.
Yeah. But also, like, you know, if an Irish woman, when abortion was illegal in Ireland up until 2018, if an Irish woman needed to get an abortion, it was obviously horrific to have to get on a plane to England to get that healthcare that they needed. But ultimately, a Ryanair flight is relatively affordable. For women in, say, the American South, that's a much further distance that they might have to travel in order to access abortion care now. It's not just a quick 40-minute Ryanair flight to Liverpool, you know, which is just something that I'm incredibly passionate about. But again, to draw us out of this quite dark spiral that I've drawn us into, just to laugh at Mike Johnson for a moment.
Yes, let's.
He is signed up to a piece of software called Covenant Eyes.
Oh.
This is a quote from Mike Johnson. Covenant Eyes is the software we've been using in our family for a long time. It scans all the activity on your phone, on your devices, your laptop, tablet, what have you. We all do it. And then it sends the report to your accountability partner. So this is a software that tracks how much porn you watch.
What a way to admit that you were watching too much porn. I'm sorry. Okay,
so
it
sends a report to, quote, your accountability partner. Again, a quote from Mike Johnson. So my accountability partner right now is Jack, my son. He's 17. So he and I get a report of all the things that are on our devices once a week. If anything objectionable comes up, your accountability partner gets an immediate notice. I'm proud to tell you that my son has got a clean slate.
I mean,
him and his son are accountability partners for the pornography that they may or may not watch.
Firstly, that makes me very uncomfortable.
And this is something that he, as a politician, publicly admitted to.
Also, 17-year-old boys, they will be accessing porn in some way. Now, it may be that his son has gone analog on this and just got himself some magazines. And if that is the truth, then good for you, bud. Good for you. You get your kicks.
Lord knows. I just find it all so icky. Like, who's being hurt ultimately?
Why are you talking about your son masturbating? Like, why are you bringing that into the public eye?
Republicans are obsessed with sex. They can't stop talking about it. They're completely obsessed. It's wild. I mean, Mike Johnson has also come out against no-fault divorces. He's also come out against premarital sex, extramarital sex of any kind, even the straight kind, or what he refers to as recreational sex.
I mean, I don't mean to be crude, but like, he sounds like a guy that just needs a good shag.
I mean,
I wouldn't want to be the woman to do it.
Anyway, it's safe to say, Mike Johnson, second in line to the presidency currently. Please vote for Democrats in November. Get him out of the job. Get him out of the job, guys.
I think we just need to get Mike out pronto.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, my representative in my old district is obviously Pramila Jayapal, who is chair of the Progressive Caucus. So, you know, I'm all set. But
I feel much better. I feel like I think the whole concept of like the House of Representatives and like the jobs of Congress people and senators is something that's felt very alien. And I think I've got a little bit more of a grasp on it, which is helpful because I think the West Wing we're going to have constant interaction with Congress people.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, I think once I've got my head around the Senate, like I'm going to feel like I can almost talk about this stuff.
Yeah. If for other people, my kind of like dark spiral that we just went on was in any way confusing, or if you have stupid questions regarding the House of Representatives, further questions, or indeed any stupid questions regarding any other element of US politics, please do get in touch. We are queergalswatch@gmail.com, or we are also at queergalswatch on all social media platforms. So please do let me know if you're baffled, confused, or irate by anything I just said.
Yes, long-winded messages of frustration, very gladly received. We love a ranting outpouring of emotion, Leigh and I. So
yeah,
feel free.
Please, feel free to just sit in this with me and Fi. This deep well of anxiety. We're all friends here. The more the merrier. Join the party.
Come on into our pity party. Before we sign off, Leigh, have you got any predictions, hopes, dreams for next week's episode?
Give me Flotus, please.
I can't express it enough. I will say it again. Where is Flotus?
I want a little kiss with Zoe and Charlie, really quite deeply.
I don't think we'll hit kiss next episode, but what I would look for is a moment of physical touch.
Yeah, I'm into Mallory. I'm into a Mallory, Sam Seaborn dynamic. Give us another scene with that duo of just Sam embarrassing himself by saying something outrageous.
Yeah, another little sparring match between the two of them would be fun.
Yeah.
I think that I speak for us all when I say I would like some more petty drama.
Yeah.
I think Hoynes was really giving us that energy of a lot of childish behavior, and I think I just quite like some more of that. I think we're having quite a lot of intellectually sound conversations, and I think I'd just like to see Josh and Toby and CJ and Leo deal with more people who are just fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that. So I guess that concludes this week's episode, Leigh. I've had a lovely time.
I've also had a lovely time.
I feel like I've really channeled some rage, which feels healthy.
Yeah.
And should we check in next week where we can talk about how much we can hold each other accountable for how much porn we've watched on our phones?
Oh God!
Check in then.
Yes.
Until next time, Leigh.
Stay proud.
Stay proud. God bless America.
As both an American and a raging gay, guys, even if you're not gay, just join the club. Just be proud of the gays.
Yeah. Goodbye. And here's to Mr. Willis of Ohio.
Here's to Mr. Willis of Ohio.
See you next week.